have to stand up and remind them what the proper balance of power is. We, the people, are the source of all political power in the United States. They work for us. So why are we filling out concealed carry permits? Anybody here fill out a government form that allows you to go to church on Sunday? How many people here have a church permit? Nobody in West Virginia goes to church? Or nobody in West Virginia is silly enough to ask for a permit? Well, the Second Amendment works the same way. How many people have concealed carry permits? Be honest. Why do you fill out the paperwork? How is the Second Amendment any different than the First Amendment? That's the chink in the army. If they can convince you that you have to fill out paperwork for that, then it's just a short stretch, well, we can pass the Patriot Act and say that we can search your house without a warrant. Technically, what it says is, we're going to search your house and we're going to give you a warrant 90 days after we're there. And the check is in the mail, and I'll respect you in the morning. How stupid do you have to be? If you haven't bitched and complained in the first 3 months, you think they're going to give you a warrant after that? The Patriot Act is probably the most egregiously unconstitutional document that's ever come out of Congress. We've already got 300 cities in the United States that have passed resolutions declaring it unconstitutional. And we're going to let Congress get away with that? If you or I break the law, we go to jail. If a member of Congress violates the supreme law of the land, they just get reelected. And the really sad thing is that we are the ones who reelect them. That's like buying the rope for your own hanging. We cannot sit back and continue voting for the Republicans and Democrats. We can't. That is political suicide. Benjamin Franklin said that there's a difference between revolution and rebellion. Revolution is an astronomical word. A planet revolves around the sun, and after it finishes a revolution, it comes back to its starting place. Well, the human starting place is private property and individual rights. And for a short period of time, we gave up those individual rights to live under a king. They were proudly British, and 15 years later, they changed the way they thought.
As long as you kind of get it in the area. Probably. Was everything he said about Reigne? I didn't hear what he was saying.
The Founding Fathers created a special place for government. It is called the Constitution. Anytime the government stays within the limitations of the Constitution, it is a good government. Anytime the government is outside the Constitution, it is a bad government, and it is time for us to stomp it out. Yeah. The United States is the greatest economic country in the world, not because of government regulation, but in spite of it. NAFTA and GATT have about as much to do with free trade as the Patriot Act has to do with liberty. They let you know that you have permission by giving you a permit or a license. If you have a marriage license, What do you have permission to do now that you did not have permission to do before? Who gave you that permission? And where did they get the authority to give you that permission in the first place? Live with anyone you want. It is not the government's priority to set those standards. Osama bin Laden was originally labeled as the culprit who perpetrated this atrocity. How have we gone from Osama bin Laden to Saddam Hussein? Where is the logic that allowed us to switch from Afghanistan to Iraq? I find it very offensive when the government tells me what I can and cannot watch. Censor yourself. Imagine that. In World War II, when Americans truly believed in the issue, young men were lying about their age to get into the military early. Americans rallied behind that war. If you cannot get your citizens to rally behind your war, perhaps, just perhaps, it's an invalid war. We have military in 130 countries around the world. Instead of doing international offense, perhaps we can bring those soldiers home for Christmas and Thanksgiving and limit them to doing national defense. Congress doesn't seem to know anything about the Constitution, which is their job. How much less do they know about medicine? Anytime the government does anything, it drives up the cost and it doesn't work. Get the government out of medicine. First of all, the Founding Fathers loathed a democracy, calling it a tyranny of the majority. The United States is not a democracy. The United States is a constitutional republic based on private property and individual rights. Our Founding Fathers were very wise. George Washington's farewell address, he encouraged us to establish economic ties with all countries and establish entangling alliances with none. Would, first of all, eliminate the IRS, giving everybody in the United States a 35% pay increase immediately instead of a $300 rebate of your own money. The economy would skyrocket with everybody having all that loose cash in their pockets. The other thing that we have to do is eliminate the Federal Reserve. We established the Federal Reserve in 1913. They have been printing fiat paper money ever since, making your money worthless. We got to get back to a commodity-based currency so that we can essentially have a stable economy. The Constitution establishes the principles for peace and tranquility. Every time we abide by the Constitution, we get peace and tranquility. Violating the supreme law of the land gets the opposite. It destroys our economy, gets us entangled into foreign wars. It is principles set down for us by our Founding Fathers. We are not satisfied with the status quo. Voting for the lesser of two evils and your candidate wins and you still get evil.
I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Edwin Vieira. We're talking about the Supreme Court. And Nancy's question was about a traffic ticket, but after this we're going to talk about Atwater versus City of Lago Vista. I know this woman personally who she was arrested for not having a seatbelt, and she took it all the way to the Supreme Court. So this is not outside the realm of possibility. Doctor, is there anything that Nancy's daughter can do to, apparently the document was tampered with, and right. It sounds like they have evidence.
Well, you have two questions, or at least two questions here. The first one is based on what I understand the situation, that the young lady is not going to contest that she went through the stoplight, or the stop sign. So she's not going to contest the underlying traffic violation. What the problem is, she apparently appeared, and the arresting officer did not. And typically, I can't speak for that particular state, but typically, under those circumstances, the charge would have to be dismissed because there isn't a witness. Traffic ticket itself is not the witness. They always have the policeman or the sheriff, whoever it is, the arresting officer there. Now, he wasn't, the case was not dismissed. Then they tampered with the document in order to change it from the 2nd to the 20th of March. The practical problem is, I'm not so sure that simply sending an affidavit, she has to respond in some way, or she'll find herself in more trouble. I'm not so sure under the local procedure, and obviously I can't give advice about this, whether simply filing an affidavit would be satisfactory. But if that's all she can do, then that may be all she can do. And it should point out in the affidavit that the document's been falsified. Put a copy of the whatever you do, don't send the original. Put a copy, attach that to the affidavit. But the wiser course may be, in fact, to show up there personally and contest it. Of course, this is an example, Michael, of how a lot of these problems, constitutional problems, disappear. How much is this traffic ticket worth? In these types of cases, this would be what they call a Section 1983 civil rights case, right? A violation of due process by falsifying documents. I'm sure this sounds to me like a typical operation of some low-level traffic court. This is probably what they do all the time and get away with it because no one's ever really pushed them to the wall on it. But the question is, how much time and money is one willing to spend to push them to the wall?
Isn't that a little bit of the problem with our system, that all the system is designed to make it much easier to pay the fine? It's only $100. You go ahead and write the ticket and just get it over with, rather than taking several days off from work and going and fighting the ticket and still, having a strong possibility of losing.
And then going up in some separate case to challenge the constitutionality of some false procedure that's been used.
Right.
I think that's exactly right.
And here you've got a college girl that has been, listening to Michael and her parents and wants to do the right thing by the Constitution and not just be a pawn of the state. But yet here she is. She's young. She's just learning this stuff. She's got college. She's got school. They're on a tight budget. It does go. How far do you fight it?
Well, okay. She definitely, to finish my point, she definitely has to do something. She can't leave it at this stage and sort of walk away from it. If physically she can't be there, she can ask for a continuance. Excuse me?
She can be there. Yes, still.
If she can be there physically, then she needs to show up. She should have the affidavit in her bag in case they refuse to let her testify. She makes what's called an offer of proof and hands this thing in so it will be in the record. But she should show up personally and testify to what went on. And then the difficulty, of course, becomes, well, what happens now if the sheriff also shows up, and so they get to the merits of the stop sign. And the judge says, well, I'm not going to pay attention to this, March 2 versus March 20, because you're all here now, and so we'll just deal with this case. And then, in a sense, it all gets washed out because she is there, the sheriff is there, the judge is listening to the merits of the case. And at that point, she will say, I think, from what I heard you say, she will say, yes, I did it. Right?
Yes, she would,
Yeah, Nancy, I think this is probably an issue that Randy Kelton would be best suited for, because he's actually taking local issues like this and prosecuting them up through the the district attorney. So I'll make sure that you get Randy's contact information, and we'll see if we can't do something for your daughter in that respect.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, Nancy, for calling in. I appreciate that. And we're going next to Marty in California. Hi, Marty. Thanks for calling in.
Morning, Michael. I'll keep this real quick. I fought the traffic tickets in California. I fought 5 of them and won all of them. One of them went to the California Superior Court of Appeals, and I won. Basically, you use their own minutia against them. You use the discovery process. You use the appeals process. And as far as the lady's daughter, I would not even concede that I ran the stop sign because use the discovery process. You know, subpoena the cop's notes and his, you know, and so forth, and the speeding ticket, subpoena his calibration record and his certification, and that's my advice. You know.
So basically, your strategy is make their job so difficult that it's not worth it to them.
Well,
you know, for 100. What's that?
Right. I always say they're law enforcement. They're law enforcement. They always tout that. Well, this is their own laws. Make them accountable to their own laws.
Mm-hmm.
And like
sure. They're responsible for proving their case.
That's right.
So in this instance, the sheriff doesn't show up. Obviously, the case can't be proven. But I was just taking the lady's word for it that her daughter was not had essentially already conceded that she had rolled through the stop sign. I mean, once you do that, you can't go back on your position if you've taken that position in court. Obviously, if she hasn't, then the other alternative she makes the sheriff prove it.
Right, but I mean, if she hasn't even had her case heard yet, then she hasn't conceded anything, has she? You know.
Well, see, I don't know. That's my assumption was one way, but if it's the other way, that's fine. If it's the other way, I would certainly agree. You make them prove everything.
Yeah, exactly.
You make them prove everything, and then they often find it difficult at that stage to continue some of these procedures.
That's right. Yeah, I won 5 of them. I'm not a lawyer. I mean, I'm just a regular guy. But it's easy. Do an hour of research. Do 2 hours of research. I don't make $300 an hour, so I think it's worth it. And if I could plug the website I use, real quick, it's helpigotaticket.com. Excellent site, free site. They're not selling anything. It's just a libertarian guy, and he helps people out. It's for California, but anyway, I thought I'd let you know that.
Helpigotaticket.com?
Yes, the most excellent site. Wonderful. I'm not involved with the site at all. I'm not affiliated with it. I just use it, and it's wonderful. Yeah. Excellent.
Maybe we'll do a program on that, because that is an issue that applies to almost everybody.
This is what I would call, Michael, guerrilla litigation. All right, guerrilla litigation. It's the average person out there in the woods of the court system, fighting on his own. And if he's well motivated and he does the background research, he's willing to take the time. Because that's obviously a question. He's willing to take the time. There's a lot of things the average person can, in fact, do, but it depends upon time and effort.
And Michael, when I did win in the Superior Court of Appeals, I didn't even have to show up in person on the appeals. I did it through the mail. I only had to show up once through the whole thing. So you don't have to.
Oh, that's an excellent advantage if you can just deluge them in paperwork.
Most of us have been working in the liberty movement and trying to promote this for so long. I mean, we get tired, and it's really hard to measure the progress that we've already made. And we need to stop, take a breath every once in a while, relax. We all need to take a vacation, short ones, but just take a couple days to recharge your batteries and look back at the way things used to be. I'm telling people that most of what the government does is unconstitutional for, 28 years now. And for me, I'm thrilled to see all these patriot groups, the Campaign for Liberty, the Oath Keepers, the Continental Congress, all these different groups.
Freedom Phoenix.
What's that? Freedom Phoenix? It's been going on for a long time. And our numbers are building. We've reached a tipping point where it doesn't take a long time anymore to talk to people about these different problems, to convince them that something needs to be done. We need to support each other as much as possible, but there's no right way or wrong way to get this done because there's so much bad stuff out there. Property is the fundamental core of everything that we do as humans. There's no place in the world where you can go that property is not important. If Ernie and I go to Paris and we're sitting along the Champs-Élysées and we're watching the French girls walk by, and I reach over and grab somebody's croissant, they're going to start yelling at us in French. And even though Ernie and I may not understand French, we've got a pretty good idea why they're upset. And if we go into court, I can say, well, Your Honor, we were from the United States. We didn't know it was against the law to take somebody else's stuff.
Well, that's not going to fly. I mean, obviously, you're not allowed to take other people's things. In some Middle Eastern countries, if you get caught stealing, they'll cut off your hand. Property is a universal concept. There is no place on the face of the earth you can find humans there. Private property is important because we need it for life. Your food is property. Your shelter is property. All the toys that you gather around you, those are property that you need to pursue happiness. Everybody understands the importance of property. It's a universal concept. Another reason that I know we're going to be successful is because the idea of private property is so simple. Even a 2-year-old understands the importance of private property. What's a 2-year-old's favorite word? Mine.
Mine.
We want it to be mine. Now, admittedly, a 2-year-old is not real clear on the concept of yours. A 2-year-old thinks everything is mine. Well, apparently so does our government. The Supreme Court made a ruling in 2005, Kelo versus New London, says we can take your property, give it to somebody else, as long as somebody else is going to pay more in taxes. Government's telling us that it's mine. I had several phone calls from people within the few days after that decision, people calling me going, Michael, they can't do that, can they? They've already come to the logical conclusion that this violates the whole spirit of private property. It's completely, totally unconstitutional. They can't believe that it's a formal statement from the Supreme Court, and they're calling the constitutional expert to confirm what they've already decided. The third reason that we are guaranteed to restore liberty is once you learn something, you can't unlearn it. Once people learn how important private property is, how universal it is to all of our human interaction, then you can't unlearn that. Now, once you learn that private property is important, you can ask yourself, well, what different forms of government do we have that may or may not protect private property? Well, the Declaration, all of our founding documents, Constitution and Bill of Rights, are all based on life, liberty, and private property. Basically, 3 items that are different sides of the same thing. You know, if you don't have life, well, there's no point in talking about having property. You may be alive, but if you don't have the liberty to make your own decisions, you're a slave. And if you're alive and they don't allow you to have property, I mean, you're not going to be alive for very long. So life, liberty, and property are this freedom triangle. You take any one of those away, and you are no longer free. The purpose, the reason that the Constitution was written, ostensibly, was to try to protect life, liberty, and property. But we've gotten it into our heads that the Constitution is supposed to protect us. Now, if nobody reads those ideas, if nobody understands those ideas, and more importantly, nobody stands up to defend those ideas, you may as well take that piece of paper and bury it under a pyramid someplace. What we need to understand is that it is our responsibility to know and defend those ideas, whether the piece of paper exists or not. But my rights are not tied to that piece of paper. I remember the ideals of life, liberty, and property, whether they're written down on paper or not. I had a young lady tell me that communism is good in theory, it just doesn't work in practice. Try saying that about rape. Rape is always criminal because it's a use of force. Communism is always bad because the first plank of the Communist Manifesto is to abolish private property. The Constitution and communism are antithetical, opposite ends of the spectrum. Either you're going to defend private property and make that a high priority, or you're not going to acknowledge that private property exists. Once you learn the fundamentals of socialism and the fundamentals of communism, you look around the United States and that's all you see. The welfare programs, all of our warfare, sending military into 130 countries around the world, the Obama health care. Why are people so upset about the health care plan? Because it treats you like a slave. The government is using your body as if the government owns your body. They're violating your property. Your personal body is property. And if you've got, half your brain working, you suddenly realize that, well, communism bad, liberty's good. You'll never allow somebody else to interfere with your rights, take your property, or infringe on your liberty. The silver lining in the clouds that we see is that the worse that the government is, the easier it is for our friends and neighbors to see that we've been right. The current administration is helping us by converting people over to our point of view.
Okay,
this is Wayne with the RedPillRadio.com with
Michael Badnarik.
the Michael Badnarik.
Nobody else wants to be Michael Badnarik. I'm the stepfather of the Constitution, and we need to save America. We're not going to save it by sending email or rallying with signs. You're going to have to get off the couch and actually do something about it. We need to start taking some serious action. Otherwise, all the blood that's been lost over the last 200 years for liberty has been wasted, and we will lose freedom on our watch.
Do you think we can do it through the voting process?
No, the voting process is absolutely corrupt. They've got electronic voting machines. I've been a computer programmer for over 40 years. If you let me write the software and keep it proprietary, I will tell you who's going to win by what percentage before the polls even open. And I don't know if it's accidental or deliberate, but the government is going out of its way to make peaceful revolution impossible.